And welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to continue to talk about prices and inflation. And I want to ask this question on this podcast. What's the big deal about inflation? Why does anybody care? Why is it a problem? After all, if we have inflation, let's do extreme inflation and say that the prices of all goods and services double, and my income doubles as well, then I'm no worse off than I was before. So what's the big deal? What's the big problem? So if inflation if you get inflation, as I said, if prices double and my income doubles, it doesn't change my purchasing power. I'm no worse off than I was before. I got to pay twice as much for my house. Sorry about that. I got to pay twice as much for my house. I got to pay twice as much for my groceries, but I'm also get paid twice as much money. So what's the big deal? My purchasing power, my ability to buy goods and services hasn't changed. So why does anybody care if we have inflation? Well, the problem with inflation is not that prices are going up. Again, for the reasons that I just said. Everybody thinks inflation is a problem because prices are going up, but not so much, because again, my income's going to be going up as well, or at least assuming if it is, I don't care about the higher prices because I have higher income. So what's the real problem with inflation? What's the real cost of inflation? So that's what we want to look at on this video. So there's going to be several costs that we're going to look at. The first one is what we call a shoe leather cost. There's going to be, I forget, 5 or 6 costs of inflation here that we're going to look at. 2 that I'm going to look at in depth, and then 3 or 4 others that I'm just going to kind of gloss over very quickly. So the first one I'm going to look at in more depth is, would be shoe leather costs. And shoe leather costs this is from the old days when you would walk to the bank, and if you have to walk to the bank a lot, you're going to wear out your shoes. So it's called shoe leather costs. The cost of making more trips to the bank to keep money in the bank in order to earn interest to offset inflation. Okay, so let's think more about this. I'm going to jump down here to this bullet right here. If inflation is very low, then I don't have to worry about inflation chipping away at the value of my money from day to day, week to week, and month to month. So as a result of that, if I get paid if I have $500 that I'm going to use to buy groceries and things like this, I can take out the whole $500 out of the bank at the beginning of the month, and I can use it to go buy goods and services as the month goes by. And at the end of the month, I've used up all my $500, and so but then I'm getting paid again, so I get out another $500 for the next month, and so it goes. So I'm only making, the key to this is I'm making one trip to the bank in a month. I'm only making one trip to the bank. Now, if inflation is very high, if prices, let's say, are increasing by 10% per week, well, then leaving this $500, taking this $500 out of the bank and keeping it out for the whole month, by the end of the month, the inflation is really going to chip away at the value of that money. So what I want to do instead is I want to leave the money in the bank earning me interest for as long as I can, because if it's earning interest in the bank, then it's helping to offset the inflation. Okay, I want to leave the money in the bank as long as I can to offset inflation. And so as a result of that, instead of taking $500 out at the beginning of the month, instead I withdraw $125 per week over the 4 weeks. So the first week I take out $125 and I use it to buy goods and services. Meanwhile, inflation's going up, but the rest of my money's in the bank earning interest, offsetting that inflation. Okay, so in terms of my purchasing power really isn't going to change much because I'm earning this interest to offset the inflation. What the real cost of inflation is that I now have to go to the bank. I have to make 4 trips to the bank instead of just 1, and then that takes time. I could be doing other things with that time, and so that's going to create a deadweight loss. That's going to create deadweight loss. So it just means I have to make more trips to the bank, and that's it's inconvenient. So that's the first cost of inflation. The second cost of inflation are what are called menu costs. So a menu cost, if you think about a restaurant, when prices of goods and services go up, every time they go up, you have to print new menus. And that's very costly. So, if I'm running a little restaurant and I have my prices, and maybe I'm selling hamburgers and it costs $7 for a hamburger, and now the price of everything is going up, I want to raise the price of my hamburgers to $10. I got to print all new menus. So this can be very costly. So there is a cost to changing prices, and not just for restaurants, but for all stores. So retail stores, they have prices posted all over the place, and when the prices go up, they got to go change all those prices. So in general, we just call that menu costs, the cost of changing prices. You got to run all new advertisements on television. You have to take time to decide what the new price is even going to be. Maybe you have to print new catalogs, or more in today's world, you have to change the price online. You have to go online and change the price. You have to create more new advertising with the new prices, and so this can be very costly. Now, it is true technology helps lower these costs. So this person over here is changing these prices the old-fashioned way, and that's very costly. And today, this person could just sit in the store and change the prices digitally, although that still takes a little bit of time, but a lot less time than this. But still, you have to do the new advertising, and so it's just costly to change prices. So when you get inflation, that means you got to make more trips to the bank, and you have to change your prices more frequently, and those are just those are costly things to do. Okay, what are some other costs of inflation? I'm just going to hit these kind of real fast. One, or really I should say number 3, third cost of inflation is the misallocation of resources. So that just means that when you get inflation, it creates distortions, and people respond to those prices and buy things or invest in things that they really wouldn't if it wasn't for inflation kind of tricking them, fooling them, distorting their decisions. So resources get used to produce things that are less valuable than for what they otherwise might have been used for. So I don't want to get too deep into that, other than just kind of to say it. It creates a misallocation of resources. And then number 4, there's an inflation induced tax distortions. So if I buy a house for $100,000 and then I sell it for $150,000, well, if most of the increase in that price is just inflation, the real value of the house didn't go up, it's just the prices went up, I still have to pay taxes on the increased value. Well, it's not a real increase in value, it's only an inflated price of the good, but I still have to pay taxes on it, and that creates all kinds of distortions. And again, I don't want to get deep into it, other than just kind of to say it. There are taxes that we have to pay simply because things have inflated because of changes in prices, not because of any real changes in value. So if I buy my house at 100, sell it at 150, and the real value of the house didn't go up, all that went up was the inflated price, I still got to pay taxes on that. Okay, and that distorts my behavior. Here's number 5. I think is probably the most important of them all. It creates a lot of confusion and inconvenience. When I try to plan for the future and think about what I need to buy in the future, it gets very confusing. What is a house going to cost 30 years from now? How much money am I going to need to retire? How much is food going to cost 30 years from now? And so I got to do all that, kind of try to plan for that inflation. This is very confusing and inconvenient. And then finally, number 6 is unexpected inflation can arbitrarily transfer wealth between borrowers and lenders. So if I borrow money, if I take out a $150,000 loan to buy a house, and maybe my monthly payment is I don't know, let's say maybe $700 a month for a 30-year mortgage or something. Well, I'm going to pay back $700 a month to the bank. So I agreed to that. I'm the borrower. The bank agreed to that. They're the lender. And let's say all of a sudden we get unexpected, very, very high rates of inflation. Well, now the $700 that I'm paying back to the bank is worth a lot less than the $700 that I borrowed when I borrowed the money. So the bank all of a sudden is losing money in real terms because the money I'm paying back to them is worth less. Again, on this video, I don't want to get real deep into that concept, real deep into any of these concepts. I just kind of wanted to mention them. The ones that I am highlighting right now are these two, the shoe leather costs and the menu costs. Those are some of the all of these matter, by the way. These are the two that I'm highlighting right now, but in many ways, some of these might even be more important. So, but all of these create costs as a result of inflation. So the cost of inflation is not just the prices are going up. That's not the big deal. The big deal is all these other things that happen as a result. You start misallocating resources. You create a lot of confusion, unexpected transfers of wealth, inflation taxes, more trips to the bank, all these things. Those are the true costs to inflation. All right, this has been Mr. Hagan on another podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.